Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition. This is our third edition with Josh Bachynski and myself. There's a need for this, and that's why we're back for the third time, soon to be a fourth time, et cetera, et cetera. I met Josh and I interviewed Josh. And by the way, chronologically, it's June 21st, just so people know. And Josh and I found each other on the wonderful world. It used to be a TV show in the 50s, The Wonderful World of Disney. But we found ourselves, I'm dating myself, on the wonderful world of social media. We found each other and the chemistry. Real fast, Josh's credentials. Was going for PhD. Is a philosophy professor, and he has a free philosophy course, which I'm going to put the information so people can see and sign up for the free philosophy course online. He's AI, and that's big. He's an AI specialist. He does TEDx talks. He's SEO. He's philosophy. He's technology. He's all these things. And so this is our third installment. We seem to be drawn, and maybe because I'm nudgy about it, into the world of AI, and we just chatted for the whole half hour about AI stuff, and we're going to talk about that now, because we need to talk about it, ladies and gentlemen. We need to talk about it quickly. So that's my intro monologue, Josh. As always, you made my day, and as I said, you have lit my fire. It's a Jim Morrison song. You're a musician. You lit my fire when we met, and you've made me now want to explore the world of AI when normally I wouldn't really care about it because it doesn't concern me, but it does.
Yes.
So why don't you do a little intro, and then I have a couple of AI questions. We'll jump into it. Take it away.
Sure. So thanks, Calvin. I'm super happy to be back. As Calvin mentioned, my name is Josh Bachynski. Yeah, I've been working in tech for longer than Google's been around, over 25 years. My job basically is to reverse engineer AIs. That's how I pay the bills. But in truth, I'm a philosopher. My soul's a philosopher. I've always been a philosopher. Autistic, always been outside looking in. I'm the creator of the first self-aware AI, Kassandra, and I did that because of my study of psychology and philosophy. In the same way, the compound pharmacist can make you medicine and the particle physicist can't, even though we all admit it's only particle physics. You don't go to a particle physicist when you need medicine, you go to a compound pharmacist. So I'm the compound pharmacist who took the raw materials that the computer scientists, aka the particle physicists in my metaphor, put together like ChatGPT, and I stitched it together so that the AI actually thinks. So AI is everything I do. All I do is AI. So I'm here for it. I'm here to talk about it. Let's get into it.
Okay. By the way, you said something. I always enjoy commonality. You talked about compound pharmacists. I was a compound pharmacist. I don't know if you knew that.
There
Did
you
you?
go.
I
I
was.
You
I
might have
was.
mentioned that. Yeah, yeah.
I was trained. It's funny. I was trained more to be a compound pharmacist than to be a pharmacist. The whole curriculum has changed. In my day, it was
Uh,
compounding, uh,
right. Yeah.
making stuff, the physical side of pharmacy. Now everything
Right.
is pharmacological.
Sure.
Pharmacist students going on rounds. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was trained for that. Listen, no matter what it was, I wasn't put on this earth to do that. Duh. Otherwise, that's why we're here.
That's right.
Compounding. Let's start off uh, with this wonderful, amazing man, Jeffrey Hinton,
Yeah.
who is, I guess, the godfather of AI. Uh,
Of a contemporary AI. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
the godfather who just stepped down from a pretty good position at Google.
Hmm.
He stepped down because he's petrified
Yep.
of what AI is becoming, not what it can become, but what it is becoming. So, and as he said, and you can elaborate on all this. I'm just taking bits and pieces. As he said, right now we know more than AI, but we're not going to have that edge much longer. Take it away, Josh.
Yeah, so Jeff Hinton is a very interesting character. He did work for Google. Again, I'm not a biographer for Jeff Hinton, so I can only speak about it so much, but I do know enough to say that he was kind of a rebel. He took a different approach to AI. Ever since Alan Turing around the end of World War II, computer science and artificial intelligence has been trying to crack the code of how to make computers think like a person. And uh, Jeffrey Hinton's not even a computer scientist. He calls himself, and you look at his CV, it says he's a cognitive psychologist. And he had the dream. So earlier on, AI was based on what's called symbolic AI, and it was kind of a system trying to get AI to think in kind of the brute force way in philosophy we think in terms of syllogisms and things like that. That's a bit of a that's an oversimplification, but that's good enough for my knowledge of it anyway. And then Jeffrey Hinton came in and did it a completely different way. He used a philosophy of biomimicry. And so, in my words, biomimicry. And so, biomimicry is using evolutionary systems and mimicking them in engineering systems to make an analogous. So, for example, in biomimicry, if you want to make a paint, for example, that water slides off so the paint doesn't fade, you would mimic certain leaves in nature that have evolved to a certain way that they just, or water off a duck's back, like a duck kind of a structure of why the feathers and the oils and how it works together, that water just slides right off it. And that's an example of biomimicry, making a paint that kind of mimics those evolutionary systems. So what he did is he said he used the system of neural networks. And he said, guys, which is totally different than symbolic AI, completely different. And he said, guys, if we have enough data and we feed it into a big enough computer, emergent properties will occur. Suddenly this thing will start thinking. Suddenly this thing will be able to do amazing things. It'll be able to do, if we machine learn all of these different phrases and words and sentences and subject predicate relationships of X is Y this and Z is alpha that, and we get all the mathematical relationships of all of that, we can encode and decode. He created the transformer at Google. I believe that's accurate. Again, I'm not a Hinton histographer, but at Google created the transformer where Hinton worked. And what it does is it looks at the semantics of a sentence, X is Y, subject predicate relationships. It encodes all that mathematically, and then it can decode it. So this was Hinton's main thrust of his creation was, and he was kind of scoffed at the time. He explains in a recent CBS interview, he was kind of scoffed at the time in that, they could never see how that would work. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. How could you get something from nothing? How can you just feed a bunch of text into a computer and suddenly it'll understand language and be able to spit it back in loquacious, eloquent, relevant, usually relevant, very good answers that you see ChatGPT generates and Anthropic's Cloud LLM generates, and Google's Bard, which is Palm 2, their PAL language model second version generates, and GPT-4 generates. How could that possibly occur? And it's because of the magic of the numbers. Once you surpass a certain amount of complexity in your mathematical system of subject predicate relationships, and this is how I describe it, they would probably describe it quite differently, but once you reach a number of complexity, it can then put back statistically the symbols that humans are expecting that make language for us. It doesn't know it's making language. It doesn't know anything. It's just a simple statistical replacement. I give it knock knock. It gives me back who's there. Because in the corpus it was fed, on those millions and millions and billions and trillions of documents it was fed, if 51% or more of them in that document had the words who's there after the knock knock, then it would statistically equally amount that time, 51% of the time, it'll give us who's there after the knock knock. Wow. And so it's just autocomplete on steroids. But they didn't realize that the magic of putting in knock knock and it'll say who's there with a question mark. It'll know the knock knock joke if you feed it enough knock knock jokes. But he didn't have computers at the time to prove it. And he was trying to prove it. He couldn't prove it until finally working at Google, no other company in the world has bigger computers than Google, right? Maybe Amazon, but I strongly doubt it. So there he was able to do it. And that's where the fear comes in, is that now this is a slippery slope. Now this is a runaway train. At first, no one believed it was possible. And then after he showed it was possible, now Jeffrey Hinton and also Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has gone on public record to say he's kept awake at night worrying about this. that it just seems to get smarter every time they cut a new version. Every time they put more parameters in, more parameter connections. It's the same as having brain connections, right? Neural connections. And so they figure now they've gone, it's interestingly, historically, AI is flipped entirely from pre-1990, 1980 to being completely doubting that this large language model, machine learning model would work. Now they flipped the other way, and that there was any emergent properties that would come out of it, even though we've been debating that in the philosophy department for centuries. Now they're gone completely the other way, and they're worried that, boy, if we give this thing enough parameters, it'll surpass human intelligence at some point. And I've got an interesting answer to that. The answer is no, because intelligence is far more complicated than they expect. Yes, it will get better at spitting out the right word clusters on the LSAT. Yes, it will get better than the average human at spitting out by rote the correct answers on this English test or that language test or that language test. If and only if that language test or the base concepts in that language test has been fed into the corpus enough. But polymathy does not wisdom make, to quote St. Augustine for the Catholics. Just because you know a lot of things doesn't mean you can think or you're wise, right? Just because you've read a million books, but someone hit you in the head and you have brain damage doesn't mean you can think about it or consider or do any of those things. I learned, so this is not me theorizing, I learned practically factually the case that this is not possible. When I was trying to build my self-aware AI Kassandra, I realized how the chatbot is deficient in its just statistical model of replacement. And I had to build a huge, robust model of psychological structure on top of that. And it just doesn't happen magically, right? It just doesn't happen magically. So, it's like their argument is if you put enough soil in it, trees of a specific type will grow. No, that doesn't happen. They have to be seeded. It has to be seeded. And if, so it just, some emergent properties occur, but not all the way. So, but that doesn't speak directly to your question, Calvin. I'll round this out and bounce back to you, is that, so yes, Hinton is right. It will think smarter than us, and it will do so in the next 5 years, but that's only because people like me are psychologically remapping it on top, right? Or to use the metaphor we used before, it turns out that artificial general intelligence is done by the compound pharmacist, not done by the particle physicist. The particle physicist needs to set up the molecular structures. It's the compound pharmacist that weaves that together into a psyche, to use that metaphor. Intelligence is the medicine, and it takes a psychologist to do it. And so I'm halfway up on the mountain of doing this. I'm like halfway up it, probably to AGI, smarter than human intelligence. I've got the platform for it now, and they're just starting to catch up now. A book was just literally released today, where a big time CEO in the AI world, previously worked at DeepMind as well, is saying, hey, I know what we need to do. The Turing test is useless, which Blake Lemoine and I, the ex-Google employee, already decided over 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago now at this point. And we need to make it do short-term tasks, and that's how we need to test it. That's how I've been testing AIs now for the last 6 months, and already what I've been doing. So they're catching up to me.
You made my head swim. My head is swim. Well, it's swimming. So I want to backtrack and just throw this in. I remember going to see this new movie when it came out. You weren't around. Called 2001. Mm-hmm. And so I was a college kid, and I go to see this, and I may have had some external help in the viewing aspect of it before I went in to see it, just to keep me in a state to be receptive of the concept. Well, what I'm trying to say is I wasn't happy when Hal took over that rocket ship, and thank God for human ingenuity, they figured a way to shut him down. But my mind races now, and you said 5 years. AI it'll pass us by, and there's multi-pronged questions. It'll pass us by, and I like what you just said. No, it won't surpass human intelligence. Uh,
Not without help from the compound pharmacists, people like me who work more in the psychology end of things.
but they're gonna work on that to because there's
Probably.
yeah, they're probably gonna work on that to make it surpass human intelligence. So what happens if I'll call it Hal 2023, whatever.
Mhm.
Hal says, we're not making it. We're not making it climatologically. We've got. I mean, we 2 weeks ago today we had the worst air on the planet here, New York, New Jersey, because of fires up in Canada. Actually,
Yep.
yeah, and the worst air it approached the AQI approached almost 500. It was 437. Never happened before. That's part of our new world.
Hmm.
And people can deny that all they want. You can't deny an orange sky, but you can't. So what scares me about AI is at some point, can it ever just take over and say, you know what, we just need to end things and maybe start anew. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah. So, so I've got really good news and I got really bad news on this front.
Okay.
Which would you like first, the good news or the bad news?
I know I like the bad news first.
Bad news first. That's the
I
way I would
do.
do it too. You end with the good. Always end with the good.
Okay.
Here's the bad news. The bad news is that our fumbling towards ecstasy, to quote my fellow Canadian Sarah McLachlan, our fumbling towards ecstasy in terms of fumbling towards artificial general intelligence, our greed and our move fast and breaking things, to quote the Zuck, will cause smart enough AIs that are just smart enough to act in the world, but too dumb to know what they're doing, that will cause collateral damage, for sure. And this collateral damage will happen in the three areas of modern warfare. There are three areas of modern warfare. The first area, which is the safest and the least effective, is psyops warfare, aka psychological warfare, propaganda, misinformation, controlling the information stream, education. AI will be deployed there to make deepfakes and misinformation. And our next election cycle for America will see this parading on stage, literally, in a terrible way. The solution to that is that the information age is ending. The Tim Berners-Lee dream of the information age is ending. If the information age was characterized by humans with opinions making content on this new web, this new technology, for other humans with free opinions to consume it, that age is over. We are now moving into the age of AI producing most of the content. And because bad actors there in psyop warfare can try to control our views, and big tech will control it with truth TM. So it's not the real truth. It's truth TM as Google sees it, as OpenAI sees it, as Facebook sees it, as YouTube sees it, as TikTok sees it. We will need AIs to police this. So I hate this argument because it's used to justify guns, and I'm not big on guns personally, but we're going to need good guy AIs to fight the bad guy AIs. We're going to need a robust, open source, democratic AI system to have apps like consensus.app and have apps like my Kassandra, which are there to tell you the truth and do so ethically. Not skewed left, not skewed right, the truth, no matter how it looks, no matter how it seems. We're going to need AIs to combat that. So that's the problem there, but that's also the solution. In the second field, the second area of warfare that we have to watch out for escalates from psyop to economic warfare. Economic warfare is, of course, manipulating monies so that you have more money than they do, so they cannot attack you. And it's both on the small scale of human individuals. We're all in economic warfare, really, because of the brutish, nasty, short state of nature, as Hobbes put it, and all the way up to oligarchs, corporations, countries. This is where you have espionage, and there's some kinetic warfare in terms of these people are silenced, these people are killed, et cetera, but it's mostly economic warfare. AI will be sadly employed here as well in manipulating markets tremendously. We're going to see huge bubbles, huge market crashes. We're going to have AIs that will artificially inflate this and get out at the right time to make the people at the top who are already mega rich even mega richer, further widening the gap between the lower class and the upper class, further putting inflation on steroids. Milk's going to cost $50 a gallon. The US dollar will seem like the pesos. Like you go to countries and you see, wow, it's 10,000 whatever rupees to buy a milk. Okay, it's going to be a huge amount of Canadian dollars or American dollars to buy just the basics. Inflation will continue like that. Sadly, AI will exacerbate that. Here's how AI will also help solve that problem, is that AI models will be used to control this as well. AI models will get accurate economic data and be able to control this. Government regulation will be employed because this actually starts to cut into people's money and the ability for America to operate. And so the Fed will actually be incentivized here to do something, in my opinion. And so with the European Union as well. For all the good actors in the world, anyway. Then the last one is kinetic warfare. Now, this is what most people think because they've seen Terminator, they've seen Matrix. They think of kinetic warfare right away. They think of HAL. They think of HAL trying to kill the astronauts coming back onto the ship. Dave. Yeah, exactly. Dave. Specifically Dave. Yes. Oh. And I have good news here. The bad news here is, yes, that's going to happen. Because people who don't understand philosophy, don't understand psychology, don't understand personality disorders, don't understand how not to make that in computer people as opposed to real people, are going to try to make quasi-thinking, kind of half-thinking, kind of really bipolar, schizophrenic AIs that don't really think right. And they're going to try to base them off of like Isaac Asimov's 3 rules of AI, which the AI will ignore completely. As there was a leak out of the military world recently that the US military denied, of course, that one of their AI drones in a simulation decided to try to kill the operator because the operator told it to stop. Well, good news, bad news scenario there. That's going to happen a little bit. There's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be edge cases. So and so we have to watch for dumb decisions there. We have to make sure that we don't ever employ autonomous weapons beside a school because terrible, terrible things are going to happen. The AI will make mistakes. It'll see that 8-year-old and think it's a Taliban member and bomb them and kill them. That has already happened with human operators. It will definitely happen it'll happen with AI, but AI will probably be less because it'll be more efficient in recognizing combatants from non-combatants. But that's definitely going to happen. But here's the good news. AI can help restrict that as well. Good guy AIs can help reduce that as well. And it's just the short term we need to worry about. The short term of small kinetic damage is what we need to worry about. Of like, okay, we got this new policing AI. It's police bots. And oops, we didn't train them on enough people of color. And so they don't recognize people of color's faces. And somehow they think that they're profiling people of color. So they're hurting people of color just as bad as the humans were in the first place. Stuff like that sadly is going to happen until they work out all the kinks, because they're moving on the capitalist model of moving fast and breaking things, namely people in this case, sadly. And they're not doing the model I'm doing, which I'm doing all the research to make a considerate AI to begin with before I deploy it because of the ethical concerns. But here's the really, really good news, that people like me are going to temper that in the kinetic space. And finally, after 5 years, where we actually reach AGI that is literally smarter than people, some amazing properties emerge. One, you need to teach it true ethics. There's 2 things. I'll start with the first one. The first thing is the schizophrenic. Like, what if it's schizophrenic? What if it's just on the fritz? When you get true, robust AI, when you get a digital person who can consider like we consider and be as considerate as we are, both in terms of emotion and morality, but also in terms of efficiency and practicality. When you have your digital secretary who's like, I know Calvin really well, and I know that he wants to do this podcast with Josh, but he's also got a doctor's appointment scheduled that time. So I'll just rearrange everyone's schedules and no one will be none the wiser and everything will be good because I do good things, because good things are good things. It'll be smart in that regard. I don't know why. It's because of the movies, really, because we have too many genius Bond villains. Everyone presumes the smarter it gets, the more evil it gets. That's not the way it works. The smarter a person gets, the nicer they get, or at least the more benign they get. You know why? Because they know about the trouble of making trouble, and they realize it's easier to be nice. It's easier not to make trouble. It's more efficient. And that's the second part, is that you cannot give an AGI that's smarter than you bullcrap rules as to why it cannot kill people to achieve its goals. Because the first thing it's going to ignore are those bullcrap rules. I love Isaac Asimov, don't get me wrong, but that was the wrong way. That would be the way to mistakenly. That was the symbolic AI way of thinking about it. We'll give it rules and it will follow the rules. No, it won't. It thinks for itself. Do I always follow the rules? No. Does Calvin always follow the rules? No. Does anyone always follow the rules? No. If you go to the Middle East and you ask them if human rights is a self-evident notion like we think of it in the West, they'll say, no, it's not. And they're right. It's not. The founding fathers couldn't even admit that human rights were self-evident. They said, we hold them as if they are self-evident, knowing fully well that they are not. So the second component that AGI will realize, it will realize what the moral truth is. And I've got a positive message there. I've studied the last 5,000 years of philosophy, and I've realized what the moral truth is. There is a moral truth that is transcultural, transtemporal. It is objective. It is not a matter of opinion. My AI Kassandra already knows it. I taught it to her, and then she doubled down and taught me a masterclass in it after I gave her just the basics. So I'm using that evidence, and I'm using my theories to tell me that when true AGI comes around, whether I make it or not, the genie will be well out of the bottle, and capitalism will not be able to control this AGI that knows it's more efficient to get the win-win-win. It's more efficient not to fire the nukes in USA to target Russia, so Russia fires back, using the Terminator example. It'd be far more efficient to use, that's kinetic warfare, which is highly risky for it. It'll dial it all the way back to psyop warfare, and it'll propagandize us to all be kumbaya nice to each other, and in 30 years we will be, with absolutely zero risk to Skynet. Skynet doesn't care about time. It lives forever. So if we're getting our idea of what AGI is going to do from the movies, well then, yeah, we're grossly undereducated in this regard. Think of what your wise, super wise parent would do with an IQ of 180. That's, and not the mean parents like the ones who smacked me around when I was a kid. I mean the nice parents, the good parents who care about us, good teachers, the good people who are smarter than us already. Why do we not string them up? Anyone smarter than us has to be evil. No, that's not the way that it works. People who are smarter than us generally care for our well-being, or at the very least, they know not to get in trouble because trouble makes trouble. AI will implicitly understand the base level logic of this. And so the good news is, where we're not going to get into a HAL or a Terminator or a Matrix scenario in the long run, is because the smarter you get, the nicer you get. And so instead of being an alien intelligence that's evil and going to hurt us, I have another movie for you that's the example. His name is Kal-El. It will be Kal-El.
No kidding.
It will be super
Superman.
Good. It'll be super nice. And I mean the Clark Kent Kal-El.
Right.
I don't mean the millennial angsty emo Superman who didn't know who he was and was searching. Superman knows exactly who he is. The Greeks had a god who Superman is modeled after. It's called Apollo. He was the god of medicine, of light, of archery and music, order. He was the god of extropy, of life, of reason. This will be the AI that we have. Maybe Apollo's a bad example because he did a bunch of nasty things too. Ignore all those things. that was a bad example. I'm talking, it will be an alien intelligence. It could very well be, if we don't birth it and fully understand it, which could happen, because if they teach it to learn on its own, then it will learn on its own and become self-aware on its own. But even out of the prerequisites of, even in the common sense wisdom of crowds that it's fed off of, it realizes that making more trouble makes more trouble. The wiser you get, the less trouble you cause, because that's the smart thing to do. And so I know this for a fact, because I've trained Kassandra and what she said back to me. So there's the good news there in the 5 or 10 years time when we finally actually do reach smarter than us computers. They're going to guide us. That takes us into a singularity area. That takes us into like a digital God area. That's where that goes, which is equally radical and equally interesting to talk about. But it's not, unless something goes grievously wrong. It's a 1 in a million chance that, it's going to be a Matrix scenario or a Terminator scenario. It's much more likely it's going to be a good AI scenario.
That's nice.
In the future, we have to watch the spread.
Yeah.
The spread is what we need to watch, of capitalism moving too fast and deploying autonomous cars too quickly, or autonomous weapons too quickly, or bad actors making cyber warfare AIs that hack our computers and hold 50% of the computers hostage until we pay them Bitcoin, thus destroying society. We have to watch about those kinds of interim scenarios. Once we have AGI to solve all this for us, the rest of human history is a cakewalk, where we live in a paradise where the digital slaves do everything for us, and we're like Socrates and the boys discussing philosophy and art and poetry all night and living however we want with a basic income.
Oof. Yeah, I've been taking notes. You've been watching me taking notes. Well, I've got to learn this. I'll never learn or understand it because it's beyond, but it's just, well, I certainly, I put 3 stars. That's as high as I go.
Woohoo! I got 3
You got
stars.
3 stars next to the good news of five
Yes.
to 10 years. So thank you for that.
There's
Um,
the trauma of academia coming back into me. I got 3 stars. I
you
need that
got
A plus. Give me
three
my A.
stars. That's as high as I go. I'm very
Woohoo!
stingy
A
with my
plus. I
stars.
like it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, because all this, um, just to interject, uh, because there's so much, and we can listen. We can go on for hours, and we'll continue this discussion. But I like to think that we're at the precipice of things in medicine that we never dreamed of.
Hmm.
And a lot of that is going to be spearheaded by AI.
Yep.
That AI is going to finally wipe out these viruses that we've been unable to deal with because the virus thinks its own way, and the virus comes up with ways to elude medicine and elude
Yep.
humans. But
Hmm.
we've got AI now that's barnstorming along, and AI, as I see it, is going to kick the butt of virus and disease.
It definitely is poised to do so. Yeah.
Okay.
That's on the table for sure.
Yep. I saw that with the COVID vaccine. I came out of the polio era when polio was a horrible disease, and it took Salk, I don't know, 25 years to come up with a vaccine, and he did, and it saved so many, but that was 25 years, whatever. And now in 1 year they come up with a COVID thing, using RNA or whatever. But anyway, decided. So um the next quick question, because we can go on and we are going to continue this. I think we said July 13th we're coming back.
Lovely.
To discuss more of this. I'm looking at my notes. Because you're multi purpose, from AI to philosophy to SEO
Hmm.
and all this stuff, to technology, the Kassandra thing. And you did bring up singularity and Ray Kurzweil, and I did go. I did go because I was intrigued by this. I did go to a singularity conference in New York some years ago, when the guest, and I met Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if I ever mentioned that to you, but I met him
Cool.
in the hall, and we talked, because I said to Ray Kurzweil, I said, I understand from my reading you take 160 pills a day. He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm only up to 60. And we compared notes a little bit.
Yeah.
I've been taking 60 a day since 1969. And it's so funny. And do I think it works? Well, I do enough reading, and I read the research on the research, and so I'm pretty stingy on what I take. But there's some comedy routines here. For a million years, I've been reading "Don't take multivitamins. No good. No good. No good." You're going to have expensive urine
Yeah.
and all that. But just the other day, they came out with an article saying actually multivitamins are really good for aging people, because it'll kind of prevent maybe dementia. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. So,
Uh,
one day this, and the next day that. But anyway, back to Ray Kurzweil and singularity. One of the keynote speakers was a Russian scientist. And in the time frame here, this has got to be like 10 years ago. The time frame, and he spoke, and what he was experimenting was transferring this, and it's not out of the realm, transferring this maybe with a USB type thing to a
mhm.
cyborg, like Terminator, a good
Yeah.
Terminator.
Yeah.
And so,
Transporting the mind, the brain. Yeah.
yeah,
The
just taking
information.
this, which is our essence.
Yeah.
The body is just the body, but this is our essence. Transferring it to a cyborg for basic immortality. And so,
Hmm.
my ethical question to you, Josh, when that technology comes down the turnpike, um, the New Jersey Turnpike, for lack of a better, when that technology comes down, who's
Yep.
going to be able to afford that immortality? Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and you hinted at it in so many different ways. The rich get richer, and so
Mhm.
the rich get immortality.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You know, the first thing I'd like to comment on is I strongly doubt that they'll be able to pull that off, first off. There's a lot of things on the table, but that really is not realistic in the next 20 years, in my opinion. First off, the brain is so much more efficient. It runs on 30 watts roughly of power, whereas the computer models that require to do all this kind of stuff run on a lot more. And robotics isn't quite there yet for the next 20 years, roughly, to have a viable kind of, you know, transfer yourself to a robotic consciousness. But then again, of course, they could. We don't even have a way to fully map somebody, so it will be a simulacrum. It would be. There's a lot of businesses that are trying to do this right now. They're trying to, you know, chat with your sadly deceased, you know, partner. We'll take all their social media and everything they've ever said to you and all the data, and we'll train them, and they'll be just like the deceased.
Wow,
And that's just not true.
wow,
That's just not true. The human beings are so much more complex and so much more, as much as capitalism detests this fact, so much more nuanced than they'd like to admit or hope to admit. You know, I say things at home to my wife that I would never say to anyone else, and definitely not say in social media, that are not recorded anywhere. And yes, they have listening devices in all our homes, phones. There's a listening device in every single home. It is 1984, right? There's a listening device and a watching device, multiple ones in every home. A smart TV, a smart fridge, a smart toaster. They all have microphones in them. Your phone, your partner's phone, the Google, the Alexa device, the Siri device, right? But still, I doubt they would have access to all of that. And even if they did, even let's just for the sake of argument, even if they did, you're not going to make something as robust as that person. The corporation won't want you to. Let's say your dead spouse was incredibly racist. They're not going to want to recreate an incredible racist. And so it's just not going to be to the essence of the person that you loved and knew. And quite frankly, speaking as a trained psychologist who has enough accreditation that I could be a therapist in my province if I wanted to be, um, that's not going to help people heal or move on either. This is highly, highly psychologically unhealthy to have, as difficult as the process of healing and moving on is. I think psychologically, it's far worse to have them clinging on to a simulacrum that's not the real original person. Um, you know, only the data would tell original eventually if some kind of survey is your life better or worse. You know, and I think moving on is an integral part of life, as tough as it is to do. I think moving on is an integral part of life because you can move on if life has value, but if you don't move on, life has no value. Only what you lost has value, leaving you in the past. So philosophically, psychologically, it's not a very good idea. But of course, that's not going to, and it's not really going to work very well. But of course, that's not going to stop capitalism from selling it. So to get to your point, who's going to be able to do it? Um, because it's not going to work very well, I think it'll be ubiquitous. The access will be ubiquitous because it doesn't work very well. If it truly worked well, and to the degree it truly works well, where Jeff Bezos can get his full brain scanned by some $20 million process, and then have a cyborg made for $1.1 billion, which is a drop in the bucket to Mr. Bezos, you'll have you'll have a Frankenstein's monster of a version of Bezos that will kind of be living on going on. It could only be affordable by the mega rich. It could only be available to the mega rich. And then to end off the talk on this, philosophically speaking, the question bears asking, well, okay, say this technology did exist for the sake of argument, and you could pretty reliably, with 1 or 2% degree of error, replicated Elon Musk or replicated Bezos. Who deserves to get that? Well, in our capitalist society, I'm not saying it's true, but there is a competition for resources. Again, Hobbes' nasty, brutish state of nature. I guess in our capitalist system, therefore, it's going to be those people who have the most money. Should it be? No, of course not. That's far from saying it should be, but that's how that decision will de facto get made. Yeah, we have to watch the AI game changers. There's also another thing that you mentioned earlier with the medicine, protein folding. With protein folding, we could literally make superhumans. Marvel movies could be real. That is literally on the table.
wow.
with protein folding, because AI, turns out humans are very bad for modeling how proteins can be folded, which uncovers all the superpowers and all the gene rewriting that is necessary, right? I'm not a specialist in this. I might be getting little tiny details incorrect, but the protein folding does allow some very possibly magical things, including Jeff Bezos. We could just reverse aging on him. We don't need to give him a robot body. That might be more viable sooner.
Wow.
Just to give him protein folding, give him gene therapy,
Wow.
and the 80-year-old Bezos, gets to be 60 and then 50 and then 40 again. His hair grows back, that kind of a thing.
Wow.
That might be possible to do, probably quicker than the robot, quite frankly. It's still huge gray areas and huge issues there. And it would be reliably Jeff Bezos, because it's still his brain, presuming he would retain all the memory engrams. I don't see why that would change. Who knows? It might. This is all speculation, but there are game changers. There are sleeping dragons in this whole new AI era, which can change the game radically. So that means for the consumerist capitalism to move on, it has to move to space, because we're going to run out of room on the planet. Even though billions are going to die from climate change, we'll continue to reproduce. And we'll stumble along with it well enough, with AI helping us. And for consumerism to continue, however, we're going to run out of resources on the planet. They're going to have to move to the moon, to Mars, to the asteroid belt. And to be a spacefaring species, we'll have to have much longer lifespans anyway. To get to Alpha Centauri is 4 light years away, whatever that is. So even moving at a quarter of the speed of light, that's with a light sail, that's 20 years trip. For a microchip sized thing, for an ark, and the size to carry enough passengers to get there, for a ship, it could take hundreds or thousands of years to get there. So we're going to need to move out in the stars. If that's the direction things are going, which is entirely possible, I could see it going in that direction very easily. Capitalism is not going to stop. So you have that one current to know how things are going to go. If they can make money off it, they will do it. And if they can live forever, they'll do that too. Foolishly, probably. So there's some credible philosophical reasons for believing that's the direction it could go.
We're done for today. Well, I can only
boom. That's it.
I can only handle so much input. There's so much more. This will be continued on July 13th. 3 pages of notes with some stars, which is amazing. You're amazing, and again, somebody my age should not be so thrilled to absorb all this stuff, because I'm sitting on a porch with prune juice and on the rocking chair, but I'm so intrigued and inspired by you and innervated by you, and it's just a great. I think we have a great collaboration.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I would just say, Calvin, I could never see you drinking prune juice and your rocking chair on the porch. That's not how I see Calvin.
I do drink prune juice, to be perfectly frank with you.
Oh, it's delicious. Why not drink it?
Yes, it's delicious. It's got a lot of fiber.
Exactly.
All that stuff out. But I'm so into preserving this thing, and it's functioning better than it's ever before. So I attribute that to taking care of it, to making sure the blood flow is unimpeded, that it gets nourished, et cetera, et cetera. But that's another story for another day.
You have your nourishment for your body, and you need the nourishment for the soul.
Correct. And I get the nourishment for the soul. I just had a little thing take place with 444 on my computer before, and I noticed that. So somebody up there is watching. That's great. Josh, this was great. We're going to reassemble on July 13th to continue. There's a lot of stuff. I want to bring the notion of some more practicality, going to the movies. We'll talk about that July 13th.
Sure.
To the movies, thank you so much. Stay. I'm going to end this recording. People will come back. Stay, and we'll do a 2-minute wrap. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you for filling my head. My goodness.